YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for Power Rangers issue 6. So if you remember where we left off, Zach and Jason have been arrested by SPD from space because of Zordon being a D-bag as per usual, and then Ecliptor arrived on the Omega Rangers ship. So that's where we open up, is Ecliptor is offering to make a deal with Trini, but first he tells her Astronema's backstory. It's kind of like a little condensed version of what we got from her childhood, from her solo comic with him. So if you haven't checked that out, you'll get a little crash course here, but I definitely recommend checking that out. Something that's worth noting though is in both last week's issue and the comic itself, they bring up how Rangers killed Astronema's family, which I assumed was lies told to Astronema to, you know, push her to be evil, which I still assume that. I think it would be interesting if it actually was something that happened somehow and is just being used, but I just thought it was worth noting that when he's talking about how Rangers killed her family, it shows a bunch of Quantrons, and I don't know if that's the case, or at least what I assumed the case in that was that he's telling him the story of, yeah, Rangers killed her family, but then they're showing what actually happened, which is Ecliptor's forces invading. But Quantrons do kind of look like Rangers. Maybe they were some sort of evil Ranger, or maybe Astronema assumed they were Rangers, and then that's why she likes using them later, because she's like enslaving Rangers to work for her or something. I don't know. I just thought that was worth noting. But basically, Trini's like taking the moral high ground, but Ecliptor's talking about how, you know, you have Draken with you, and there's a funny moment where Draken says, it's always nice to be noticed. It's like, Draken is just low-key like JDF's personality if he was evil. It's just kind of funny. And also, later, Draken makes it sort of not a deal, but he kind of presses the guy that they lost that game with last week for that part that they need for the ship. But he also seems to make some sort of side deal with him, so we'll see where that goes. And then Jason and Astronema and Zach all kind of have an interesting conversation in their cells, kind of this mutual understanding of backstories. And are they trying to make them a couple or something? I don't know. I don't know if you can feel chemistry from a comic, but I felt like I felt chemistry. And she was kind of reminding me of Alice, but that's probably just because I watched Batwoman last night. But there was some interesting scenes between the two of them. But Trini does join forces with Ecliptor to break them out, and we get another cool jailbreak scene. I feel like in this series we've already gotten two really like badass Omega Rangers like break-in scenes. Like this is a prison break, and then they also broke into prison break Draken at the beginning of the series, and they're both like just cool in concept, but they have some really cool moments in them. And there's like a moment where the SPD officer is like, "Oh, you're going against everything Power Rangers stand for," and Jason's like, "We don't need the moral lesson," and he goes bzzz against the cage. I'm like, damn, that was badass. So they're fighting to get out, and Astronema initially is like against them, but then she sort of works with them because, you know, Ecliptor's with them. But then after all is said and done, she pulls a blaster on Jason, even though he just saved her during the fight. But then when one of the SPD officer dudes comes out, she saves him by throwing him overboard, and she's like, you know, repaying the favor. It's kind of an interesting mirrored moment. Again, I think there's going to be some sort of interesting relationship between him and Astronema. I don't necessarily think romantic, but I think that's the interesting connection that's been made amongst this. But they, you know, then Trini's like, oh, that's unforgivable or whatever. I'm like, well, the dude was going after Jason. But they've split ways after that and head off, and there's kind of an interesting discussion about, like, you know, are we crossing the line? And Jason's saying, you know, sometimes you have to do these things that don't seem right to do the ultimate right thing. And she's like, well, that's the way Draken thought. So there seems to be a lot of that discussion going on, which is interesting, you know, because they are kind of on the outskirts of everything. And they do have Draken with them, who has done that previously. Obviously, he had a lot more of a warped sense of what he thought was right. But I don't know. I think that's interesting stuff. But as of right now, I'm still totally on the Omega Rangers side, because as of these last couple issues, they have had to do some shady things, and I guess breaking Draken out, I think breaking Draken out was the most direct shady thing they did in terms of, you know, crossing the line. Obviously, they've been crossing the line these few issues, but they've had to do it now because their backs are to the wall. Like, if I just don't like Zordon, and if Zordon didn't do that to them, they wouldn't be forced to do a lot of this stuff they're doing, and it wouldn't make their job more difficult. But then they do bring up that we can't forget what the main threat is, which is the Imperials. And I almost forgot about them again. It's just kind of funny, both in Mighty Morphin and in Power Rangers. There's been a lot going on, again, between the Astronema stuff, and there's been a lot of interesting stuff to discuss, and I've been so focused on us launching Astronema and Ecliptor's story and the Onyx stuff, and then over in the Mighty Morphin comic, been so focused on the Green Ranger, like I forgot other stuff that was happening. Like in the main comic, I was forgetting that they were in the Dome story, and I forgot that we had the Imperials to look after here, because there's a lot going on, in a good way. I'm not saying I'm confused or anything, but it's kind of nice that there's lots of different plots going on, but because I was so focused and interested in what was going on directly in this issue, I almost forgot about the Imperials. But I think it's going to be a very interesting story to play out, with some sort of moral stuff in there. I'm not talking about like, oh, don't bully stuff, but I'm talking about like moral debates amongst like what Rangers should do and shouldn't do. I'm still Team Omega all the way though. But what do you guys think? Do you like this issue? Are you enjoying the story so far? Are you Team Omega or Team Zordon? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. Thank you for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.